Okay, welcome everybody. This is the Mac for the Blind Fall 2022 online course number 3. This is all about the system settings application, formerly known as system preferences, that those of you who have upgraded from earlier versions such as macOS Monterey or Big Sur and have taken the plunge into Ventura. One of the biggest sort of changes, I guess, is that system preferences is no longer called system preferences, and it's now called system settings. This was a bit of a shock to some of us beta testers way back. And I'll be honest with you, initially when I looked at this stuff and I started exploring, I was kind of shaking my head, wondering why Apple had done what they'd done. It was another one of those, developers that they have nothing better to do. But then as I explored and I really understood, and then some sighted folks and partially sighted clients explained to me that the settings now resemble a lot of how iOS settings appear, it kind of made sense to me, because it makes it, again, another tool that Apple is using to make it easy for switchers from Windows to come over to the Mac. Because if you've been a long-time iPhone or iPad user, you know, a lot of this stuff like Launchpad and now system settings gives you a little bit of familiarity and continuity, so that, you kind of have a better understanding of what you're doing. So system settings has completely overhauled the way that you deal with changing settings on your Mac. Not only is the layout completely different, but you will also discover that familiar settings that you were used to for years and years, for those of you who are longtime users, have now been moved into unexpected places. So I will try to demonstrate as much of that as possible as I go through the settings. First, discuss system preferences, kind of, to sort of compare the two. So if you remember correctly, in the past, you would open system preferences and there would be a scroll area to the right. You would have your Apple ID settings first, and if you used your VO right arrow, you would get to the scroll area and interact, and the preferences would be selected by buttons that would open up the specific preference pane. And then you could go back to the Command L would take you like to show all the preferences again. So, you had network preferences and security and privacy in general and accessibility. And sometimes those preferences would have tabs that would be sub-preferences, like, for example, security and privacy, which had the 4 tabs like general and file vault and file wall and the privacy settings. Well, that's all changed. Now, you can still launch system settings in the same way that you could launch system preferences. The easiest way is probably from the dock. It's now going to be on your dock as system settings. You can also use the Spotlight search and just type system settings. You can go into your applications folder, and it is its own individual app. The way I tend to launch system settings is the same way that I launched system preferences. I set up a handy dandy keyboard shortcut in the keyboard commander feature of VoiceOver. So if I press right option, Shift S,
system settings appear.
It will open up the system settings app. If you have by any chance set up a keyboard shortcut for this particular app when it was called system preferences, you are going to have to go back into your keyboard commander settings and just change that to system settings, just to make sure that it works. I know when I first tried to use it when I was beta testing Ventura, it wasn't quite working. So I just had to go and make that change, and it's working fine now. So as I said, you have a table here.
Row search text field, black table, appearance, selected.
So this is a table that you need, just like with any table, you interact with the table. Now, for those longtime Apple users, this is going to be a very familiar relationship. Apple loves to do this thing with the left side of the screen, selecting something on the left side of the screen, and then the right side of the screen reflects your selection. So in a way, it doesn't surprise me that they've done this and that, they've kind of gone to this kind of relationship. So I'm going to jump to the top of the table.
Search text field, table, index, appearance, level 1, row 1, John Panarese, Apple Light.
So just like, and I just used, because I'm using a full-size keyboard, I just used VO home to get to the top of the table here. So as you VO down arrow, it's kind of a familiar
Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, network.
Very familiar layout to the iOS, whether you're using an iPhone or an iPad. You're going to kind of hear a similar sort of setup, but obviously with the Mac flair to it, because there's obviously settings on a Mac that are different than those on the iPhone. I am not going to be surprised if in future versions of Mac OS, they streamline this even more to look like iOS, and they might consolidate some other settings and change it a little bit to kind of really, kind of take that flavor over from iOS. But I think this is kind of the first step sort of thing. So I'm just going to VO down arrow
Bluetooth
here.
network.
So you have your network preferences.
Notifications.
Sound.
Focus.
Screen time. And remember, focus used to be the do not disturb.
General.
Appearance.
Accessibility. Control center. Siri and Spotlight.
So I'm just VO down arrowing through the table here. But I'm going to go back up here for a moment.
Control appearance. General.
To general. Now, there's two ways you can get to the actual scroll area with the general preferences. You could stop interacting and VO right arrow, or you could use the handy dandy VoiceOver J or jump to link to item command. My favorite underused VoiceOver command that I love to point out to my clients, whether you're using Finder or music or reminders. It works in so many different apps contacts to jump between the different content areas.
In general, scroll area, 11 items about button.
So I just VOJ'd, and the first item in the general preferences, surprise, surprise, just like in iOS, is the about. So this would be the same kind of situation when you VO space on on one of these buttons.
Vertical splitter, about scroll area.
You have the scroll area here.
MacBook Pro.
So you have all the information about the
13-inch
computer.
M1 name. John's MacBook Pro chip. Apple M1 memory. 16 gigabytes. Serial number C02F43. Apple Care Plus expires. Apple Care Plus heading Mac OS.
So I'm just VO right arrowing through the scroll area after I've interacted with that scroll
MacOSVentura version 13.1 heading displays. Built-in Retina display. 13-point display settings. Heading storage.
So you notice
display settings button.
Within the about section, you have additional buttons to open other preferences as well.
Trademark and cut license out of a vertical table, general, selected.
So I'm just going to go back to the general table here.
In appearance, general. In general, scroll area, software update, about button.
So about to the right of that.
Software update.
There's your software update. No longer its own individual preference. This is kind of confusing to a lot of people, including yours truly here. When I first started to beta test Ventura, I was looking for the software update, and I knew, it was a table, and I interacted with a table, and I, for the life of me, for a little bit, couldn't figure out where in the world they'd put software update. But I'll show you an interesting little thing you can do in a bit here. If you really have difficulty finding a preference, you can actually very easy open that preference. But I'll show you what I discovered after I go through some of these changes here. So we have software update. Now, remember, I'm still in the general preference
storage
page.
Button.
There's your storage. So storage is now under the
AirDrop and handoff button.
AirDrop and handoff.
Login items button.
Login items. This used to be in users in groups. and is now in the general preferences.
Language and region button.
Language and region.
Date and time button.
Date and time.
Sharing button.
Sharing.
Time machine button.
Time machine is no longer its own preference. It is now in the general category.
Transfer or reset button.
There's your transfer and reset. So a lot of this stuff, I'm sure of those of you who are very experienced and familiar iOS users, this is all going to look very familiar to you because these are the types of settings that are in the iOS general settings as well.
Startup disk button.
And we have startup disk, no longer its own individual setting.
About button. About
and then
button.
We're back to about again. So general has changed, quite a bit in all of the things that it used to have.
In toolbar, content is empty. In table, general.
So I'm just going to go to
appearance.
Let's see if I can find
accessibility, control center, Syrian privacy and security. Desktop and dock displays, wallpaper, screensaver, battery, level 1, lock screen, level 2.
Lock screen here. So it's got a lock screen setting now. And they've moved some things into this particular setting.
In lock screen, scroll area, 22 items, start screensaver when inactive. For 1 hour, start screensaver when inactive.
Here's your
Pop-up.
screensaver.
Warning, 2 space display will turn display off for 25 minutes, custom.
So here's where you can turn your display off, which used to be the energy sickness.
Turn display off on power adapter when inactive. For 25 minutes, custom. Require password after never. Require pass. Show message when locked. Show message when locked. Toggle button. Show message when locked. Set. Heading when switching user. Login window shows. Login window shows list of user. Login window shows name and password.
Right arrowing. Now also keep in mind while I'm thinking about it, some of these scroll areas you can navigate by headings as well. So just like on a website, you could turn on quick nav and you could turn the rotor to headings, or you could use VO command H to navigate to the next heading as well. So that can be another handy way to get through these scroll areas if you're kind of used to the layout and you know where you need to go.
Show the sleep, restart, show the sleep, show password hints, off, accessibility options button.
There's your accessibility options. So people would be asking, how do I get VoiceOver to work in the login window? Well, now you have to go to the lock screen preferences and you have to locate
accessibility options.
And this is where you would turn on the, VoiceOver speaking in the login window.
Help button.
And then there's obviously your help.
Accessibility options
So
button.
I'm going to jump
in
back.
toolbar, in table.
So the VOJ will first take you to the toolbar, and then the second time you do it, it will take you back to the table itself.
Touch ID and password, users and groups.
So there's users and groups. There still is a users and group preferences here.
Level 1. Passwords. Level 2. Internet accounts.
Internet accounts, passwords.
Game Center.
Game Center.
Wallet and Apple Pay.
Wallet and Apple Pay.
Level 1. Keyboard. Level 2.
Keyboard. So you notice they're separated and bunched together in different types of preferences as well in the table. There's your trackpad.
Printers and scanners.
Printers and scanners.
Level 1. Hurry in. Level 2.
And there's my third-party app at the bottom of the preferences. So, you got to kind of get used to this table and being able to kind of know where things are now located. And obviously, too, with accessibility, they've added a lot more to the low vision stuff for those users who are not totally blind.
Level 1, row 1. John Panarese, Apple
So
ID.
I just jumped back up to the top of the table. Your Apple ID
Wi-Fi,
settings, Wi-Fi, Bluetooth.
Network.
So your network preferences are still here, but they have, kind of changed it a little bit. So I'm going to jump into network
In
preferences.
network scroll area. Elect firewall, inactive button.
So here's where they put firewall now in here.
Heading other LPSS serial adapter, heading other services. LPSS serial adapter 2, not configured, but Apple USB Ethernet adapter, not connect. Thunderbolt bridge 2, not connected. Thunderbolt bridge, not iPhone USB, not connect. More pop-up button.
So this is what used to be the table of the network preferences.
Help button, Wi-Fi, connected button, firewall, inactive button, heading other services.
So just to kind of let you see how they've sort of changed this a little bit, and these have become buttons. And then if you VO space on the button, you then can see the specific settings. I haven't honestly explored everything in here yet. I'm still trying to wrap my own brain around where to find certain settings and how to change configurations for certain things. And it's been a little challenging without a doubt, but as long as you persist and you keep looking, you'll be able to find everything. It's just that it's really been moved around. So I'm going to jump
in toolbar, in table, notifications, sound, focus, screen time, general, appearance, accessibility.
I'm going to go to accessibility here.
In accessibility, scroll area, 20 items, heading vision.
So again, we have the headings. So all of the different categories for the accessibility are separated by headings. So vision, just like in iOS,
VoiceOver button
is at the top.
Zoom button, display button, spoken content button, descriptions button, heading hearing.
And then we have hearing.
Audio button, RTT button, captions button, live captions beta button, heading motor, voice control button, keyboard button, pointer control button, switch control button.
So I'm just VO right arrowing for you, those of you who are interested exactly what I'm doing. So I just jumped into the scroll area like with all the other preferences, and I am just kind of navigating through here. General,
Siri button,
Siri,
shortcut button, help button.
So again, very iOS-esque in how it's laid out. So if you really are a very comfortable iPhone or iPad user, it shouldn't really be that difficult to kind of adapt and even locate some of the familiar preferences. But again, as I said earlier, remember too that this is a Mac, so there's going to be some additional things that are not present in iOS. So, but it's there. It's just sometimes you got to look in places you're not exactly, used to being, looking for them.
In toolbar, content is empty. In table, control center.
Now, control center. One of the other questions that's come up, I've seen it asked on lists, and it's come up with a couple of my clients as well, is the clock feature for having your clock announce the time on the hour. So I'm going to jump into control center here.
In control center, scroll area, 59 items, heading
so
control.
This has got a lot of stuff.
Heading control center modules. Heading these modules are always visible in control center. You can choose when they should also show in the menu bar.
So you'll see here.
Wi-Fi. Show in menu bar. Wi-Fi pop-up button. Bluetooth. Show in menu bar. Bluetooth pop-up button. AirDrop. Don't show in menu bar. AirDrop pop-up button.
So they're all pop-up buttons. So you can change how you want these modules to show up if you want them on the menu or not.
Focus. Show when active. Focus pop-up button. Stage manager. Don't show in menu bar. Screen mirroring. Show when active. Display. Show when active. Sound. Show when active. Sound pop-up button. Now playing. Show when active. Heading other modules.
And then we get to, again, headings for other modules.
Heading these modules can be added to control center and the menu bar. Accessibility shortcuts. Show in menu bar. Show in menu bar. Off switch. Show in control center. Show in control center. Off switch.
So if I wanted to make these show up in the control center or the menu, I can turn the switch to on.
Battery. Show in menu bar. Show in menu bar. On switch. Show in control center. Show in control center. On switch. Show percentage. Show percentage. On switch. Hearing. Show in menu bar. Show in menu bar. Off. Show in control center. Show in control center. Off. Fast user switching. Show in menu bar.
So there's your fast user switching for those of you who are wondering who use it. This is a great little feature in case you don't know what it is. If you're sharing a Mac with other users who have accounts on your computer, so like, for example, you're in a family situation and somebody wants to quickly just check their mail or whatever, you can actually have your stuff go into the background and they can temporarily switch in with their account. Your stuff still remains open, so you don't have to worry about losing any of your data. And then when they're done, you can quickly switch back. And this does not require a full restart.
Don't show. Show in control set. Show in control keyboard brightness. Show in menu. Show in control center.
So
heading menu bar on clock.
Here's the clock.
Clock options button.
So there is a button that has the clock options.
In dialogue.
VO spacing, and it opens up the dialogue. So this should look or sound familiar to those of you who are used to this.
Show the day. Show the day of the week on heading time. Style digital, selected, style analog, use a 24 hour, show AM/PM, show AM/PM, flash the time separators, flash the time separate, display the time with seconds, off, announce the time, on switch.
There's your announce the time.
Interval, On the hour, interval, pop-up button.
And there's a pop-up button for the interval. So I have mine go off on the hour.
Customize voice.
And then you can customize the voice. I use the Irish Siri voice as my clock voice.
Heading date. Show date. When space allows. Show date. Pop-up button. Show the day of the week. Heading time. Style. Style digital. Style analog. Use a customize voice button.
Okay, so that's
table control.
So I just hit the escape key to close that dialogue, and I'm back
in Syrian Spotlight control set.
Back on in the table of the preferences. So, you know, Control Center again is a kind of revamped or reorganized.
Syrian Spotlight. Privacy and security.
Privacy and security has changed a bit here, so we're going to jump into
in privacy and security. Scroll area. Location services button.
So you have location services. I'm VO right arrowing.
Contacts button.
There's for contact.
Calendars button.
So these are really, you know, again, this is kind of an iOS thing, how they've done this.
Reminders button, photos button, Bluetooth button, microphone button, camera button, HomeKit button, speech recognition button.
So these are all the different categories so that you can, you know, you can grant permission to
media and Apple Music
to
files and folders button.
Applications that ask for, you know, access to these specific categories.
Full disk access button, focus button, accessibility button, input monitoring button, screen recording button, automation button, app management button.
So again, you're going to have to kind of look in here. It's not the, you know, the usual way security and privacy is laid out. So you may have to kind of poke around until you find the category that you're looking for.
Developer tools button, analytics and improvements, Apple advertising, heading security.
All right, so then it goes back to security again. So I'm going to use VOJ.
In toolbar, in table, privacy, and
to jump back to the table here. All right.
Desktop and dock.
So we have desktop and the dock settings.
In desktop and dock scroll area, 51 items, heading 43%, 0% position on bottom, minimize Windows user, scale effect, double click a Windows zoom, minimize windows into application icon, on switch, automatically hide and show the dock, on switch.
So again, these are all your, you know, what was the dock and menu bar table that we just got used to. They have now changed and made it more of a layout like iOS with the
animate opening show indicators, show recent applications in dock.
So show recent. Give you a quick little idea of that.
In toolbar, content is empty. In table, desktop here. Displays, wallpaper, screensaver, battery, lock screen, touch ID and password, users and groups.
That's another one I wanted to
passwords.
Show you guys, and of course,
internet account passwords.
We do have passwords. This is kind of like the iOS for looking up passwords that you've saved to your keychain. You have to unlock the, you know, the preferences to be able to see them on the Mac side, just like you have to do in iOS with either Touch ID or Face ID or your passcode.
Internet accounts.
Then you have your internet accounts. And this is, again, it's going to be shown with buttons instead of a table. So, you know, you have to activate the specific internet account that you want to view. So if you happen to get, you know, any kind of notification that tells you that there's an issue, maybe you have to re-enter a password for a specific account, you would have to go into the internet accounts and select that specific account, and then you can manipulate, you know, the password or user ID or whatever is you're being asked. There's, for those of you who, like me, have the trackpad on your laptop and you want to prevent from accidentally like triggering things, there's a setting for hot corners that you can turn off that does help quite a bit. And of course, I can't remember where I saw it. If there's certain preferences that you're used to using or locating, they're still here. You just have to kind of look in the different preferences to actually find them. And that can be a bit of a challenge, especially if you're not sure what they, you know, where they actually put them. So it might take a little bit of exploring, as I've been doing little by little over the last few months.
John Panarese, Apple ID.
So, you know, your Apple ID, as I said, is going to be at the top, and I'm just going to...
In John Panarese, scroll. Panarese name, phone, password and secure payment and shipping button. iCloud button.
This should look very familiar.
Media and purchases. Family sharing. Heading devices.
And this is just like the iOS screen when you go into your Apple ID settings at the top of the settings screen. So, if you click on the
Family, media and purchase iCloud button.
iCloud
scroll area.
You'll have the scroll area.
You have 200 manage documents, photos and video messages. Backups, mail, 141.6 optimize max storage.
So you have all those things that you would see instead of optimize iPhone storage or iPad storage, it's going to be Mac storage. So all of your familiar Apple ID and those settings are going to be found in a very similar layout than what you've seen with the with your iPhone or your iPad.
141.6 gigabytes. Help button. Freeform off. iCloud. You have 250 gig out of close. But iCloud scroll area. Vertical table in Wi-Fi. Bluetooth.
Okay, Bluetooth. I think I wanted to show you.
In Bluetooth on switch. This Mac is heading my devices. John Panarese's keyboard. Disconnect button. Show detail button. Connected. N dash. Battery.50 image. 64%. AirPods Max. Connect button. Show detail button.
So you see how the layout is now. It makes it much
One updated
easier
item.
than the table.
One updated item.
So that you'll be able to connect or disconnect items with a little bit more ease, in my humble opinion. Particularly my AirPods Max and my regular
One
AirPods
updated item.
Pro, sometimes with the Mac,
One updated
are
item.
very finicky. And let me just get out of here before
In
it
toolbar,
drives me
content in
crazy
table.
by saying one updated item. But it makes it easier for me to actually connect those devices, because for some reason, even though, I guess maybe because I use them with so many different devices of mine, that with this Mac, it doesn't always automatically connect. So I kind of have to go in the Bluetooth and make it do that. So that's always a little bit of fun as well.
To keep changes when closing documents on switch.
Yeah, this is where those things that used to be in the general preferences. So for the resume and autosave features of macOS.
Ask to keep changes when closing documents.
Ask
to keep changes when closing documents on switch.
So there's an on and off switch instead of a checkbox.
Close Windows when quitting. Close Windows when quitting an application. Off switch.
So there's a switch, and again, if you want to make it so that you get prompted when if you make any edits to a document before it just automatically saves it, you can check.
Ask to keep changes when closing documents on switch.
So you can make sure you're asked to keep changes, and if you want to
close Windows when quitting. Close Windows when quitting.
You don't close Windows when quitting an app. And this is, again, personal preferences I explain to my clients. I like it so that when I close like TextEdit or Safari and I reopen them later, it will remember the things I was doing last, and it will actually reopen those items. So that works for me, but that might not work for anybody else.
Stage Manager, toggle button, default web, Safari.app.
There's your default web browser. I don't know why they put it here in dock and menu bar, but if you want to, I don't know, for folks who want to have Brave or Google Chrome or Firefox as their default web browser, this is where you
heading mission control. Heading mission automatically rearrange when switching to an application. Switched group windows by displays have separate space. Shortcuts button. Hot corners button.
Yeah, this was the hot corners thing I was talking to you about. So this is under dock and menu bar. So again, you got to look for preferences because they may not be in the most obvious and the logical places sometimes. So it's something you kind of got to get used to. But as I said to you earlier, I kind of stumbled upon this completely by accident when I was looking for the software updates. And it just sort of occurred to me to look at the view menu. So let me just jump here
in toolbar, in table,
to the table
menu bar,
VOM,
system file, edit, view,
and go to the view menu. Now, if I go down the view menu,
view about,
you'll notice that all of the sub preferences are listed here in alphabetical order.
Accessibility, AirDrop in hand, appearance, Apple ID, battery, Bluetooth, control center, date and time, checkmark, desktop and dock, displays.
So you notice checked right at the moment is desktop and dock, because that was the last thing that I was looking at. And that kind of tipped me off. So
Extensions, focus, games, internet, keyboard, language, lock, login, network, password, Korean, printers, privacy, profile, screen sharing, Syrian, software update.
Now, if I VO space,
software update, general, appearance, general, out, vertical, general, software update button.
It will take me right to that preference that has the sub preference. So there is my software update. Now, in other instances, it will take you right to the preference itself.
About, startup, transfer or out, vertical, table, in table, jump, menu, edit, view, about, accessibility, control center, accessibility.
So it'll put you right on the preference itself in the table. So it doesn't matter where you are. If you go to the view menu and you locate it, and keep in mind that it is in alphabetical order.
Menu bar, edit, view.
So let me just see something here.
View, menu, screensaver.
Yeah, if you hit the first letter of a menu item, it will jump right down to that particular letter.
Screen sharing, Syrian, software update, time machine, touch ID and trackpad, transfer or reset, battery.
So I'm just hitting random letters to jump around on this menu, just to kind of give you an idea.
Date and time, desktop and displays, extensions, focus.
So again, all of the preferences that you could possibly look for are listed in this menu, in the view menu, under the view menu, I should say. So when in doubt, and you're really not sure where you gotta, where you can find a specific thing that you were, always used to seeing in one place or another, this is where to look.
Users and groups.
I just wanted to show
users
you
and
users and groups too.
Out, vertical, users, show detail button, John Panarese, show admin, guest user, show detail button, off, add account button, automatically login as dim, off, automatic login can't be turned on because File Vault is enabled, network account server at network accounts help button.
So they took a lot of the stuff out of the users and groups. But obviously, if I had more than one user on this Mac, I would have their accounts aside from mine. And since I have File Vault turned on this laptop, the automatic login is turned off. And this is also where you can add a user. And if you had multiple accounts, you also, as an administrator, you're able to delete accounts as well. So they did strip down the users and groups preferences. The one thing I have not been able to find.
Network automatic off, automatic add off, show detail, guest admin, show detail button.
I think it's under the show details.
John Panarese, show detail.
But that should show you the specific details of an account, which used to be called the user options, that you could right click on an account and see. So again, it's getting used to, locating where things are. And that to me is going to be the biggest challenge, I guess, for a lot of the Mac users, especially if you're a non-technical individual. And, you kind of got used to knowing where to go in system preferences. And now you kind of have to go look in other places. But it's not that difficult. And as I said, if you keep in mind that Apple really is trying to emulate the iPhone or the iPad settings, you should have a much easier time understanding how this stuff is laid out. And again, it's funny because it didn't occur to me that that was the case. I was just looking at the table going, what the heck? What did they do? And then it was interesting because I was working with a client who's partially sighted. He's using VoiceOver on the Mac, but he does have low vision, so he's able to see things. And he had just upgraded to Ventura, and we started talking about system settings. And he sort of pointed out to me and said, hey, in case you didn't know this, since you're blind, but they made system settings in the table really look like the settings on the iPhone. And you're going to find that in some of the settings, they're laid out exactly how the iPhone settings are. And it was really interesting because the switch kind of went off of my brain And it sort of made sense because I was kind of thinking that was the case, but I thought it was my imagination until Kevin told me that that was the case. And I kind of confirmed this with one of my cited Mac and iOS geek friends who really reads about this stuff and picks up on it. And then when I read that that article from Apple Viz, that kind of confirmed what I'd been told. So, you know, it does give you kind of comfort and familiarity if you're coming over from the iPhone. So the thing you got to keep in mind is a couple of little things, as hopefully I demonstrated here. Number one, there's really no check boxes and stuff and radio buttons and the initial preferences. You do have to either, it's a drop down menu, pop-up menu, whatever term you want to use. Sometimes it's a button that activates a dialogue, and then you make your choices within that dialogue. And other times it's an on-off switch. So VO spacing, it's kind of like checking or unchecking a box, but in this case, you're turning on or you're turning off a setting. So you really want to pay attention to, as you explore the different preference options, you're going to want to make sure you understand what control, and this is where the VoiceOver hint system, I know some folks get really ticked off, and as soon as VoiceOver starts yapping, they're hitting the control key to shut it up. But remember, sometimes those hints can be very valuable to you if you're not sure, especially when you're dealing with like a new layout and a new way of looking at the different preferences. Those hints can be a time saver because they kind of tell you. And also keep in mind that as you navigate with the VoiceOver keys, you do have those text descriptions that you don't see if you tab. I know sometimes people coming over from Windows, they get used to using the tab key and shift tab, but that can do you a disservice initially, because if you use the VoiceOver arrow keys, as I was doing, you'll notice that the descriptions for some of the settings are kind of off to the side of the control itself. And if you're using tab and shift tab, you're really just going from control to control. So you're not necessarily, you know, you're going to miss that little piece of information if you're not careful. So just a tip. Again, I know because I've had an influx of a lot of Windows clients who are switching to the Mac or who are wanting to use a Mac and Windows, and they're not, you know, they're used to that whole thing with the, you know, with tab and shift tab. All right, I know this was a little quick, but that really is the system settings. I know some people like kind of saw this as the big monster that, oh, why did Apple do this? Why did Apple change it? But hopefully this demonstration, this lesson will kind of make the point to you that it's not as difficult as you might initially think it to be to explore your system settings. And, you know, kind of the trick is going to be learning where things are now, in my humble opinion. That's still in the kind of a work in progress for me personally. There's really not much more I can show you. But obviously, if you guys have any questions or you want to see something more specific or you want to know where a setting is, we can do that right now. So the first little while I was looking at these preferences, I was lost. I totally was lost until I got the table, understand that typical Apple relationship with the table and the right side. So, you know, if you've used the VoiceOver utility, if you've used the reminders app on the Mac, you know, the music app with the sidebar, and selecting something from the sidebar and music, the right side of the screen reflects. So it's kind of a very Apple-esque kind of thing that they've changed now the system settings to, if that helps anybody better to visualize this stuff. You know, that's kind of how I started to view it and understand it and make sense of the preferences. Is once I got that relationship down, then it kind of clicked into place, and then it just became a matter of me finding the preferences that I was interested in. So for those of you who have asked for the recording and a question comes up later, you know, you're going to have the recording to hear me say, just shoot me an email and ask your question, and I'll be happy to respond to it. And I will catch you guys on the other side or in a future lesson.
Remember, for all Mac, iOS, and any kind of Apple training, visit MacForTheBlind.com. John Panarese has some free courses and some reasonable paid courses. You won't be disappointed. See you next time.